Andy Chrisman of For Him has spent 40-plus years in Christian music, and chances are he knows your favorite artist personally. Now he's bringing you their stories.
I'm Andy Chrisman.
In his new podcast, 1 Degree of Andy, he sits down with the voices behind the songs for real, honest, and faith-filled conversations you won't hear anywhere else.
That's a great question.
If you love Christian music, this is your backstage pass.
The 1 Degree of Andy podcast.
Listen now to 1 Degree of Andy wherever you get your podcasts.
Each week on Culinary Confidential, Christina Cates, a seasoned foodie who has worked at some of New York City's top restaurants, will share her passion for the culinary world. Whether you're a professional chef, a restaurant enthusiast, or a lover of good food, Christina dives into the heart of hospitality, exploring the trends, triumphs, and challenges facing the food service profession. And you won't want to miss her chats with some of the most interesting and influential industry voices. And now, please take your seat at the table as Culinary Confidential with Christina Cates starts now, exclusively on AM 970, The Answer.
Welcome to Culinary Confidential. I'm your host, Christina Cates, and tonight's episode is one that truly defines what it means to build, scale, and sustain a restaurant empire in America. This show is produced in association with my dear friend, Lucas A. Ferrara. There's something absolutely timeless about a great steakhouse. Not trendy, not fleeting, not chasing the next big thing, but rooted in tradition, precision, and an unwavering commitment to excellence. But let's be honest, this industry is not for the faint of heart. In a world where restaurant concepts come and go faster than ever, where nearly 60% of restaurants don't make it past their first year, and only about 20% continue past the 5-year mark, there are a select few that don't just survive, they define an era. It's a business built on razor-thin margins, relentless hours, and constant reinvention. And yet, there are a few rare brands that not only survive, they become institutions. Tonight, we're talking about one of those institutions. We're exploring one of the most iconic family legacies in American dining. Because when you talk about steakhouses, hospitality, and the power of consistency, you cannot ignore what the Lombardo family has built. At the center of tonight's story is Steve Lombardo III, the CEO and general counsel of Gibsons Restaurant Group, a man who didn't just step into the restaurant business, but was truly raised in it. He's the next generation of a brand that helped define Chicago's dining scene, carrying forward a standard of excellence that has made Gibsons one of the highest-grossing independent restaurant groups in the country. To understand where he is today, you have to go back to where it all began, with his father, Steve Lombardo Jr., a true industry pioneer. In 1989, alongside partner Hugo Ralli, he opened a Gibsons Bar and Steakhouse on Rush Street in Chicago, and what followed was nothing short of extraordinary. It wasn't just about great steak. It was about energy, consistency, larger-than-life hospitality, and creating a place people wanted to return to again and again. That single restaurant became the foundation for an empire, one that now includes multiple concepts, a proprietary USDA-certified beef program, and a reputation that extends far beyond Chicago. Let that sink in. This wasn't about following the rules. This was about rewriting them. And over the decades, Gibsons has become more than a restaurant. It's become a destination, a place where deals are made, celebrations unfold, and hospitality is not just expected, it's perfected. This is not just a steakhouse story, though. This is a multi-brand powerhouse that has mastered everything from classic American steakhouse dining to Italian elegance, seafood, and modern hospitality experiences. We're talking about concepts like Gibsons Bar and Steakhouse, Gibsons Italia, Lux Bar, Quartino, Hugo's Frog Bar and Fish House, and much, much more. But what really sets this group apart? Consistency, culture, and an almost obsessive commitment to hospitality as a craft. Because true hospitality isn't just about what's on the plate. It's about how you make someone feel the moment they walk through the door. It's the rhythm, the confidence, the sense that you're exactly where you're supposed to be. And that doesn't happen by accident. It comes from leadership, from legacy, from people who understand that running a restaurant, especially at that level, is both an art and a science. Because in a world where restaurants are constantly chasing trends, this group has built something far more powerful: trust. Guests walk into Gibsons restaurant knowing exactly what they're going to get. Exceptional food, impeccable service, and an experience that feels both timeless and current. And behind that evolution, behind the expansion, the brand building, the next generation of leadership is tonight's guest who knows that world intimately. Steve III, as he's more casually known by his team, is at the helm, blending that old school hospitality DNA with a modern strategic approach to growth. He represents what happens when legacy meets leadership, when tradition evolves without losing its soul. So tonight, we're talking about family, about building something that lasts, and about what it really takes to carry a restaurant dynasty into the future. The reality is, the restaurants of today are not the restaurants of 30 years ago. Today's guests are more informed. They're more selective. They care about sourcing, sustainability, experience, and storytelling just as much as they care about what's on their plate. So how do you honor a tradition while still staying relevant? How do you maintain consistency at scale while still making every guest feel like a VIP? And what does it really take to operate at that level, night after night, year after year? That's what we're diving into tonight. From the business behind USDA prime beef to the psychology of hospitality to what it means to grow up in one of the most respected restaurant families in the country. This is a masterclass in what it takes to build and sustain an iconic brand. So whether you're in the industry, dreaming of opening your own place, or just someone who appreciates a perfectly cooked steak and a great dining experience, this episode is going to give you a front row seat into what excellence really looks like. Stay with us, because tonight we're going behind the scenes of one of America's most legendary restaurant empires. Steve Lombardo, welcome to Culinary Confidential. It is such a pleasure to have you on the show. I feel like I've been hearing all about Steve III for years now, thanks to my friend Shayna. And I have to say, she always tells me what a wonderful company Gibsons Restaurant Group is to work for and how genuinely nice the Lombardo family is. I'm telling you, she says that constantly. She just says they're just so nice. So in an industry known for eccentric founders and fly-off-the-handle bosses, it's really impressive to hear what a great team culture the Lombardo family has built, and it's no wonder why your restaurant group is so successful. So welcome to the show tonight.
Well, thank you for having me here, Christina. Very appreciative being in here. And I'll just say it looks like I fooled her so far.
And that's not easy to do, Steve, I'll tell you. Okay, but you grew up in one of the most iconic restaurant families in America. What's your very first memory inside a Gibson's dining room?
My father had a restaurant where Gibson's is today, going back to the mid-'70s, called Sweetwater. So I remember going there. I mean, I don't remember a time in my life when it didn't exist, where we weren't on that particular corner. And he had other restaurants as well when I was growing up, in bars and nightclubs. But I remember watching the Bears win the Super Bowl at that restaurant, again, before, this was 1986, before the restaurant became what it is now, which is Gibson's. It opened as Gibson's in 1989. And I had bussed tables at the prior restaurant, and I was a freshman in high school. And I think the first, I know I was there when it opened, but my birthday was probably within the first month or so it opened. I remember eating there for my birthday that first year it was in existence. So
I love it. Great memories. Okay, what stories did you grow up hearing around the dinner table about the business, the restaurant business that we love so much?
So this is a misconception of, there were no stories around the dinner table because my father was working at the restaurant.
It's always how it goes, right?
He was working. He worked his tail off, 6 days a week. On the seventh day, he rested and would be asleep all day. So we went to the restaurant sometimes to go see him. I remember, saddling up to the bar as a 3-year-old and ordering kitty cocktails from the bar, and the bartenders humoring us and stuff like that. And that sort of thing. But
Shirley Temples.
That was just kind of normal, that you grow up with that. You don't know any better. That's was a normal life. You met a lot of people. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
A lot of people.
I interview a lot of founders and entrepreneurs, and they all say the same thing. If our children wanted to see us, they had to come to the restaurant. So there is a common theme there, because when you're in the industry, you're in it, and there's no off days, and that's what separates the restaurants who make it and the ones that don't. Now let's talk about how Gibson's first came to life in Chicago. What was the original vision?
So my father, this is probably 86 or so, he goes on an R&D trip to New York with Rich Melman, if that name is familiar to you. He's the founder of Let Us Entertain You Group, and another gentleman. And they went to probably 30 or so restaurants in like a 48-hour span.
That sounds
and
fun.
just walked from restaurant to restaurant, would order half the menu. God forbid something was really, really good because, you couldn't have more than a half a bite of anything. And he came back after seeing, a number of steakhouses at the time, Peter Luger's, Smith and Walensky. And he really thought that was a concept that had been, at that time in Chicago, there were maybe 6 steakhouses. Now today there's 60.
Wow.
Or maybe more. It was a concept that was a little passé at that point. It was kind of looked at as old school, and, people were eating healthier at that particular time. That's something that ebbs and flows. People weren't doing the 3 martini lunches anymore. And so it was very counter trend. And he came back to Chicago. That was the idea he liked, that he wanted to do. He had this restaurant that had run its course. It was probably 12 years old at that point, and he knew he had to do something with it. He told me, I got 3 kids that I got to put through college. I don't know what I got to do something else than what's there now. Although it was a very successful restaurant in its day, it just had, it lived its life. And so it took him about 3 years to raise the money.
Wow.
To ultimately shut down what was there in 2.5 maybe, and then reopen it as Gibsons.
So what was the Chicago dining scene like overall when Gibsons first opened? Because now when you think of Chicago, it's a bustling dining scene. I would say it rivals New York, if not better.
Yeah.
But back in the day, what was it like?
Yeah, so hard for me to say because I was only 14 at the time. But
you were a man about town.
It clearly wasn't what it was today. There's 2 major things that helped Chicago's food scene, if more than anything else. Charlie Trotter was one of them. You got to give him his props and his due. I don't know when he came into Chicago and opened his restaurant. Probably was around that time, maybe a little later. But Mayor Daley getting elected in Chicago, he was sworn in within a few months of our opening, and the whole tenor of the city just changed. I mean, This is no different than like Giuliani getting elected and just changing, like, oh yeah, we're going to actually enforce the law and we're going to crack down on crime and make it safe for people to come into the city again. And it took years, but it was on an upswing for the 20 years he was in power and as mayor. And so Charlie really putting Chicago on the map as a food town, and other chefs then coming to Chicago to go work for him. And then Daley making a place that people wanted to go out.
Absolutely. Again. So what set Gibsons apart from other steakhouses at the time? Like, what was the it factor even back then?
Yeah. So, again, there were only about 5 or 6 at the time. The Palm was one of them.
Yeah.
Morton's, the original Morton's, was right across the street from us. In fact, the founder, Arnie Morton, was a mentor to my father and helped him in the business. And so it was... And we all bought the steaks from the same vendors, the same vendor. It was, U.S. Stockyards. And so, what made it different was not just the food, although I would say we probably were one of the earlier restaurants to do the big, like just everything became gigantic. The martinis were gigantic. The lobsters were gigantic. The steaks were gigantic. The desserts are gigantic. But besides that, it was a relentless commitment to the quality of the food, right? But let's be clear, it's steak on a plate. This is not Charlie Trotter, for example. It's not haute cuisine, right? But to do it really well. And then the other thing is, I think that does differentiate us more than anything is our commitment to service, that hospitality to the customer. And I will tell you a quick aside, and he won't like me saying this, but I mean, it's a plug. I read Unreasonable Hospitality right when it came out. I met Will Guidara couple months later. I told him how I loved the book. I made it mandatory reading for all our managers and chefs. And that the only thing I said when I was done with the book, I was angry. And he started laughing. And he goes, I know why you were angry. And I go, huh, really? And he goes, because you wish you had written it first. And I said, you nailed it.
Oh, now I'm going to read the book.
He was able to write down stuff my father's been doing for 50 years.
Right.
Now, that's not to take away of anything that Will is done, because he is amazing, and to do what he's done, we couldn't do. So it's not that. But that idea that every customer is special, and just giving them the food that's on the menu is not always the answer, right? Or just being nice to them isn't always the answer. It might be something above and beyond that.
Right. Okay, do you remember stories about those early days, though? I know you were younger, but like, was it an instant success? Or did it take time?
No, it was not.
Okay, tell me about that.
It took years for it to, I mean, it was a long, slow build. Okay. Number one. Number two, what I would say is their answer, and this is in our, I mean, it's in our training materials. It's the answer is yes. What's the question? We'll do whatever you want. The customer will figure it out. We'll find a way, whether it's, make something that's off menu, use alternate ingredients. If we don't have it, can we send a busboy to the grocery store to go get it? I mean, or borrow it from a neighboring restaurant. We didn't have cheesecake on our menu. The original Eli's cheesecake was down the block from us. So my father would just run over and grab cheesecakes or send somebody if somebody wanted cheesecake, right? But, there were a couple key things over the years. I mean, it was really trying to make every customer feel special. There's a great story that he tells. He had the mindset, still does to this day, and any restaurant owner knows this, that it's kind of precarious. Things can change very rapidly. Through no fault of your own, you could have something happen and it could put you out of business.
That's right.
Frankly. And my father still believes that our company is on the edge of disaster every waking moment. So
I get that.
And that goes into, a customer has a great experience. If you're lucky, they tell one or two people. If they have a horrible experience, they're going to tell 10 people. And if you are a higher check average operation, they're going to tell as many people as they can because, it's Gibsons Steakhouse. So you're not going to believe these guys think they're so great. Well, we don't believe our own hype, right? We know we screw up a lot, but he tells a story about a guy who was the managing partner of a very large law firm in Chicago, a top 5 law firm in Chicago. And he brought a woman to the restaurant. This is like in the first year or two of our being open. And it happened to be, we weren't normally busy. It happened to be the night of one of the big conventions in Chicago. And so the restaurant was jam-packed. But he had been coming in and liked it, but it was pretty quiet most nights. And he brings this woman on his first date and just thought he could walk in. And he would have been right 99% of the time. There's no seats. Father runs upstairs to the office. He just takes his arm and just whips it across the table and just knocks everything off the table and brings the table downstairs, throws a tablecloth on it. Okay, great. That's nowhere near this. That's like the very beginning of the story. So he's on this date with this woman, and these conventioneers are really rowdy and raucous. And this table behind him, a guy keeps laughing. And every time he laughs, he throws his chair back and he hits the chair behind him, which is the one he's in. And, he asks him, if they could calm down a little bit or if he, be careful. It almost gets into a fight. These guys are standing up, ready to start throwing fists. And he is a managing partner of a top 5 law firm, and he realizes it's going to be in the newspaper the next day if this. Yep. So he gets up, grabs his date, and they leave, and they run out the door. My father calls him the next day, apologizing, trying to win him back and figure it out to do something to make it right by him. And the guy won't take his calls. My father continues calling. He finds out through a friend that the guy likes cherry pie. We have a cherry pie dessert. So he keeps sending cherry pies to the guy's law office. Finally, he gets a call from the guy's secretary who says, listen, Mr. So-and-so has said you need to stop harassing him. And if you call here again or show up at this office again, we're going to get a restraining order on you.
Oh, my God. Stop.
Okay. So my father doesn't stop. He finds out another friend of his who, I don't know if he was an investor with us or not, but he was a close friend of my father's who he was a client of that firm and not a small one. And he asked him, he basically had the guy go over and threaten to pull his business unless he, met with my father for dinner. And so the guy finally relented and said, I will do it, but after this, you're never going to talk to me again. And my father said, okay, don't worry about it. Like, if you just meet me. And he had him for dinner for, an hour. And in that hour, he won him over, just, schmoozed him and said, and the guy would end up, either he or the law firm, spent with us. And this is back, when dollars were smaller, still a big amount today, but would spend like $100,000 a year at the restaurant. So that was, the level of going above and beyond to try to fix a situation. Most people would give up at any way along that road. The other thing that really, one of the great stories, and I don't know how this happened. the guys who wrote the gossip columnists in Chicago, or the kind of the who's who, they lived up the street. And so they would come in, well, one was male, one was female, but they would come into the restaurant and, they would report on when there would be a celebrity there. And so then that sort of fed on itself.
Yeah, momentum.
But we had the Chicago Bulls, 2 years after we opened, they start this run of, winning 6 championships in 8 years. At some point, it got to be a superstition for the team. And they talk about it in The Last Dance. They don't mention the restaurant, but they talk about it when they're talking about the triangle offense, and they would do it in the restaurant after the games. And I'll explain that. So, but they got in their head that they had to come there after every home game. There were a couple seasons they were there every single night, but they wouldn't eat as a team. They would all have their own separate groups. In the case of Rodman and his own entourage, and they would be at different tables in the restaurant, and that's where he would talk about the triangle offense in the restaurant, because they would be in different corners. And then they wouldn't come in till the game would end at 9:30, 10 o'clock. They would work out. By the time they got to the restaurant, it'd be 11:30, midnight, and we do a full restaurant at midnight to 2 a.m.
Right, like a forced seating.
Yeah, we have a corner bar table that's on Rush and Bellevue, the 2 streets that the restaurant sits. And it's like a fishbowl. And that was Jordan's seat. Would love to have this seat right at the corner. And they could tell when the Bulls played, because there'd be lipstick on the glass and there'd be handprints and all sorts of stuff, like the cleaners would have to do an extra.
Oh my gosh, I love this story.
Work a little extra just because of that. Yeah.
Great. Okay, we are just getting started with Steve Lombardo III of Gibsons Restaurant Group. When we come back, we're diving into how you scale a restaurant brand without losing what made it special in the first place. Stay with us. You're listening to Culinary Confidential with Christina Cates on AM 970 The Answer.
Over the last 30 years, Newman Ferrara, a New York City law firm, has evolved into a national practice focused on real estate, commercial, litigation, civil rights, class actions, and other complex litigation, representing many of the city's largest property owners, managing agents, and thousands of tenants. Newman Ferrara handles some of the nation's most significant class actions and civil rights matters. Newman Ferrara at 55 East 59th Street, New York City. Go online to newmanferrara.com. That's newmanferrara.com. Listen to the firm's name partner, Lucas Ferrara, every Saturday at 10 a.m. on Dottie Herman's longest-running real estate radio program, Eye on Real Estate, on AM 970. A real estate lawyer for 35 years, Lucas is a professor at New York Law School and is also a published author with books on real estate and New York's landlord-tenant law. Tune in Saturdays at 10 a.m. to hear Lucas's unique perspective and advice on Eye on Real Estate.
Welcome back to Culinary Confidential with Christina Cates on AM 970, The Answer.
Welcome back to the show. I'm here tonight with Steve Lombardo III, CEO of Gibsons Restaurant Group, and we're about to get into the business of growth, expansion, and building a restaurant empire that actually works. Steve 3, as you're known, right, with the team.
Yep.
Welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I know, this is so fun. Honestly, I think Chicago is such a great town, and you guys are like your legacy in that town. You and your siblings, like, you didn't get into the restaurant industry like for your main source of career for most of your life. Like, why didn't you just stay in the family business?
Yeah, so growing up, I mentioned before, my father wasn't around much. And my mom worked in the business too. There were nights when I was in high school that in no sane measurement should I have not been grounded for a long, long time, that I beat my parents home, because they were working that late, right? And so my father really tried to hammer it into me. I'm the oldest of the 4 of us, but all of us, that, you don't want to be in this business. This
Right.
is, you're just going to work your butt off. In fairness, I'm not a restaurant operator. I'm a CEO of a restaurant company. They're 2 different things. And the restaurant operation is very hard, very difficult. And so, by the time I graduated college, we had 1 restaurant. By the time I graduated, I went to law school, and I kind of went to law school. I didn't really know what else. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. My father sort of pushed me into it, and I find out, I've pieced this together over the years later. It was because he hates lawyers, doesn't trust them, and he wanted a family member to be a lawyer, someone he could trust. But
Well, that worked out well.
we had, yeah, but we were just opening our third restaurant at the time I graduated law school. There wasn't really a space for me in it, and obviously I'm way over credentialed to be working a restaurant at that point. But I practiced law for 17 years. I worked doing mostly private equity, M&A, some venture capital stuff. I did a lot of advisory work though to companies, including our company, right? And so was involved with restaurant leases and raising money and financings, and was involved with a lot of the larger strategic decisions that were happening between my father, his partner, the CFO, and then I'd be involved in those discussions as well. And so, at some point, and I tell this story, this is absolutely true. These guys were all the same age. So this is like 20 plus years ago, but they're all 83, 84 today. So now they're in their early 60s. And I'm just forget I'm related. I'm just saying, guys, you have to start succession planning. You got to start thinking about this. And my father's answer to that was to work out an extra hour every day.
He's not going anywhere.
I'm going to live forever.
Yeah.
Right. I'm going to live forever. And it was about 10 years of pushing these guys to really start thinking about what's going to happen next. And in the meantime, they'd open a few more restaurants. And my father finally was like, yeah, I think, I don't want anybody outside the family to be involved. His partner was looking to sell. His kids had no interest. And so he brought me, and my brother was already working in the business at that point. And then my two sisters ended up around that point in time. One about that same time and one much later. But and I told my father, I said, there's a reason for that, and that's because you weren't around when we were growing up. So
it's funny. I worked at the Palm. I don't know if you knew that ahead of tonight. So that was two Italian families, the Bazzi's and the Ganzis.
Yes,
succession
I'm familiar
planning.
With that story.
They didn't really have anyone else that wanted to carry the legacy forward either. I mean, Bruce Bazzi had his son, who was definitely the face of the company, but the Ganzi side really didn't have anybody, and that's not even around anymore. Now it's owned by Landry. So I'm so happy that you pushed for the legacy planning of this amazing company that's been around for a long time, because without you kind of pushing your dad, who knows how it would have happened, right?
Yeah. No, that's right. That's right.
So what do your other siblings do in the restaurant?
My brother works, he's worked in the operations. He now oversees more the systems and from the strategic standpoint. Both of my other sisters work in marketing. One is sort of general marketing and social media. The other is digital marketing and manages the website.
I love it. And I'm sure that does make your father very proud that his 4 children are all involved in this thing that he spent his whole life sacrificing to build. All right, let's talk about...
He absolutely is.
Yeah.
He absolutely is. He doesn't tell me that, but he tells other people that.
Isn't that how it always goes? All right, you have built concepts that range in vibe and experience. How do you avoid them with competing with each other?
That's interesting because we have 7 of them that are within a square mile of each other.
Yeah.
Chicago's a big enough place you can do that. New York's a big enough place you can do that. There's a few towns that are big enough that you can do that. There aren't many, but Jose Andres does that in DC. He's got 3 or 4 restaurants on the same block. Mm-hmm. You have to have a dense enough area to be able to do that. And you've got to differentiate, right? The concepts are not the same.
Right.
They are different. There's, to your point, a different vibe, different price points. And so the customers are different.
So Gibsons Italia feels like a bold step, right? It's elevated, modern, globally inspired. What was the vision behind launching that concept?
So we do things a little backwards.
Most restaurant groups do.
So the location and the building sort of defines the concept for us.
Okay.
As opposed to we've got this concept and we want to go into this space.
You reverse engineer.
Yeah. And so the owner of the land that's on, where that building is, was Larry Levy, if you're familiar with the Levy Restaurant Group and Levy Concessions. So he bought that building 40 years ago because it has this amazing view. Now, it was all industrial, light industrial over there. It wasn't very, seedy is not the right word, but it wasn't a very safe area. It just wasn't populated. And he sat on it for a while, finally partnered with a company to build a building in the mid-aughts, and then '08 happened and that killed that. And then he restarted it up again a decade or a little less than a decade later. He brought us in. At that time, he'd already sold out of his business, and we went over to look at it, and the guy who was giving us the sales pitch told me the story after the fact. He said, I'm going on and on. I'm droning on and on about all the great tenants we're going to have and this and that and how great the building's going to be and all this. And your father's not listening to a word I'm saying. He's just looking straight out at the river. It is really probably the best view of Chicago as a downtown Chicago. And he's not hearing a word I'm saying. And he's like, and I realized, Mr. Slick Sales Guy, I should shut up and let the view do the talking. So,
That's right.
That was the inspiration, right? That you have this thing that is there. So how do you design a restaurant around that? And so when you go to the restaurant, you'll see every seat is geared towards and faces towards that window, towards the view. And it's almost like a stadium seating.
Wow.
Yeah. So everyone has that luxury and nobody's missing out on it.
I like that.
Yeah. And then, design the menu around it. It's a modern steakhouse with an Italian accent to obviously super popular concepts in the United States. It kind of just came together from there. And my father, he's a designer at heart, an architect at heart, not formally trained. He and his architect designer have worked together for 40 years. They're sort of Lennon McCartney, where they do better together than they are by themselves or with other people.
Yeah.
And so they make good music together.
I love that. And let's give a special shout out to Chef Drew Keene and Susie Griffin at Gibsons Italia, who have both been on the show. We really do feature Chicago a lot on here. Okay, before we go to our next break, Steve, let's talk about these amazing operating partnerships you have with such credible names in fashion and in the hospitality industry, Jose Andres and Ralph Lauren. How does that come to be that you get involved working with them?
Yeah, so every partnership we have has been unique, right? Every company is unique. They have their own unique culture. We also operate a restaurant at Disney World with Steve Schussler, who's the founder.
Steve Schussler, that's right. How could I forget
on
Steve?
your show, right?
Yes.
So they've each come about differently. Polo was the first one, and there's multiple stories, variations of the story. I'll tell you the one I like the most. I'm not sure if it's true, but they created this restaurant in Chicago. Polo created this wonderful restaurant in Chicago. It is designed beautifully. It's, the Polo Bar in New York is an offshoot in many ways. It's different, but you can tell they're related, right?
Yeah.
And they built this beautiful restaurant, and the cuisine was an Italian steakhouse because that was Ralph's favorite food. It's kind of off-brand, though, for Polo, right?
Yeah.
Not only that, Chicago, and I'm going to say this with respect to all your New Yorkers who are listening in, Chicago is a graveyard of restaurant concepts from New York that have come here thinking, we're from New York, you got to love us, and they've failed miserably. It's not because Chicago's provincial or anything. I think there's a little bit of, you can do the velvet rope in New York and Miami and LA. It doesn't fly in the Midwest. And a lot of New York folks have come out here and tried to do that. And it just doesn't if we're exclusive, if we're hard to get into, people will want to get into us more. And it doesn't work.
That's not Midwest hospitality.
No. And not that Ralph Lauren was doing that. They weren't. That's not how they operate. But I think they had a lot of the staff and the people there were from New York. And so I can't say why or why not, but it didn't succeed. They were not successful in their first year. And my father had a friend of his who was on the board of Polo.com. After a board meeting, the then president of the company grabbed him and said, "So you're from Chicago, aren't you?" And he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, for the last 3 years, I've heard from the boss is my restaurant this, my restaurant that." He says, "Now we've been open a year. We're way below projections." He said, "Now it's my flipping restaurant. Do you know anybody in Chicago who knows how to operate?" Now, again, that may or may not be a true story. That's a story I've heard. My father tells a different story, how he approached Polo directly because he loved the restaurant. He just thought it wasn't being operated well. And he reached out to them through this Polo.com board member to say, you know what, I really think we can make something special of this. So there's two sides to it.
I like that.
So, it's their restaurant. It's how do you incorporate the vision? In this case, it was creating a menu around the brand. And that was almost immediately, it took a little bit of time because they would pull things off and add things. But over the course of, a few months, they totally changed the menu. The staff, now being held accountable, pretty much had flipped over to either new hires or people who had worked with us in one of our other locations. And, when the president of the company had asked my father what he thought he could do in terms of revenue, and my father gave him a number that was like 4 times the current number.
So they were like, "You're hired."
Yeah, no. He was like, "Yeah, okay, buddy." He didn't believe it. And then when the first year was completed and he asked, "So what'd you guys do?" And we did, I think the goal my father had said was like 6 million, and we did like 5, 9, 8 or something. He goes, "Oh, you should have told me. I would have come in and done a party and to get you over the top." But so, we've continued, but again, we've always tried to sit in the background. It's their restaurant. They have, Ralph and Ricky have had input over the years on menu, and, we love their ideas. They're successful for a reason. They know what they're doing. It's a great partnership. And we helped them with Polo Bar in New York, opened that with them. And that was, again, Ralph had a very significant involvement in that menu. And, there's a lot of overlap to what's in Chicago, but it's not the same. Mm-hmm. It's great. They do just a phenomenal job. Absolutely. And then the design's all them. I mean,
it feels so cool being there. I mean, I go to Polo Bar as often as I can because it still is one of the hardest reservations in New York. And I tell you, I just went there last month and I was like, they still got it. It's still packed in here Saturday night, like any night of the week. So they're doing a great job there. Thanks to you. All right, still ahead, what it really takes to run restaurants at the highest level, from leadership to culture to longevity. More with Steve Lombardo III of Gibsons Restaurant Group when we come back.
Over the last 30 years, Newman Ferrara, a New York City law firm, has evolved into a national practice focused on real estate, commercial, litigation, civil rights, class actions, and other complex litigation, representing many of the city's largest property owners, managing agents, and thousands of tenants. Newman Ferrara handles some of the nation's most significant class actions and civil rights matters. Newman Ferrara at 55 East 59th Street, New York City. Go online to newmanferrara.com. That's newmanferrara.com. Listen to the firm's name partner, Lucas Ferrara, every Saturday at 10 a.m. on Dottie Herman's longest-running real estate radio program, Eye on Real Estate on AM 970. A real estate lawyer for 35 years, Lucas is a professor at New York Law School and is also a published author with books on real estate and New York's landlord-tenant law. Tune in Saturdays at 10 a.m. to hear Lucas's unique perspective and advice on Eye on Real Estate.
Welcome back to Culinary Confidential with Christina Cates on AM 970, The Answer.
Welcome back to the show. We're continuing our conversation tonight with Steve Lombardo III, and now we're getting into the heart of what makes great restaurants truly last. Steve, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
All right, what does great leadership look like in your restaurant group today?
That's a tough question. I mean, it's really, leading by example, number one, and, being consistent, being firm but fair. You got to have standards, high standards, the highest standards, frankly, and hold people to them. That being said, it doesn't mean that, we talk about in our business that it's impossible to be perfect. In manufacturing, there's a concept called Six Sigma, which is like reducing the error rate to 1 part per 1 million widgets produced or whatever you're making, right? We'd be lucky. I mean, a restaurant that could reduce their error rate to 1 per every 100 meals served would be phenomenal, right? You'd be the best restaurant ever. So people make mistakes, and, understanding that's just part of the business, and that there's two things, do you repeat those mistakes and learn from them? And then secondly, they're a great opportunity to recover with the customer gracefully. Like, how do you recover from those mistakes gracefully? And you can recover a customer it's an opportunity to go above and beyond.
Absolutely.
With the customer. So
yep.
That's it.
When I was at the Palm, of course, we made mistakes there as well. Like, even as a manager at my level, I mean, we would make mistakes. The customers or guests that I had that were the most loyal were people we were able to turn around from a negative experience. So
100%.
just because someone has a negative experience doesn't mean like you're never going to see them again. It's how you get them back is the win. So I totally get that.
One quick quote in there that we say here, you can screw up the food and save it with the service, but you screw up the service and you lose somebody forever.
That's very true. That's very true.
And we might not use the word screw it up.
Exactly. You certainly can't say the real word on the radio here. All right. How do you build a culture that people actually want to stay in when we're talking about like on the employee level?
Yeah. So it is showing not only, part of being successful with the customer is showing them that you care, right? Mm-hmm. It's no different with the employee. You have to show the employee that you care. You can't give the employee everything they want, right? But showing them, just reasonableness and being nice. I mean, being respectful. There's a way to communicate with people and coach them and train them as opposed to yelling at them. And, the old days of chefs yelling at people in the kitchen. I mean, I'm not saying it never happens, but and certainly, in other places, but you can't do that anymore.
No,
it just doesn't work. I mean, it's not motivating to people. So how do you build that culture? It's just living it by example, doing it every day, rewarding and recognizing the people who are doing the right thing.
That's right. Geez, I'll never
Telling
forget.
stories. We tell a lot of stories. I know you've heard a few of them. The one with the cherry pie and my father is one. But we tell those stories over and over again and try to get newer ones every day to show, hey, this is how we do it.
You can't let those stories get lost, though, as the generations go on. So you got to write those down or something and put it in the employee handbook.
We do.
Okay, good.
Not in the handbook, but we do. We have a repository of them, and we're trying to continue to get more and more. So
yes, that's so important. Okay, do you feel like there's a lane that this restaurant group hasn't explored yet?
Oh, I mean, I will tell you what we don't do small well. We know how to do big well. So our restaurants are generally big. I mean, our smallest restaurants, are still doing 10 million in revenue. And it's just, we don't know how to do small well. I'll just say that. So that's definitely a lane, getting into fast casual or counter service, like that's just not our thing. There's all sorts of cuisines we've not explored other than flirted a little bit with a couple menu items. We've really not touched Asian very much. I think, we could do a Japanese steakhouse concept would work very well. I can envision what it looks like and everything. But going back to the partnerships, I mean, we can execute food and service. And so we may not be able to create, French cuisine with a level of Michelin style, but that's just finding a great chef, hiring a great chef who can.
That's right.
And building that into the system.
As you continue to grow and evolve, what excites you most about the future of Gibsons Restaurant Group and where you can take these concepts next?
Well, a couple things. I would say that, I've jokingly referred to our hospitality as, this Gibsons level of hospitality that we were preaching the gospel of Gibsons, right? And we want to spread it. Here, we have people who spend some of the most poignant moments of their lives with us. That's a cool and enormous responsibility, frankly. It's a very cool thing. They celebrate their weddings. They celebrate, people's end of lives, with us, all sorts of stuff. So that's an awesome thing. And so, to try and grow that and bring it to more people is, that's kind of a calling, right? Where are we going next? We're looking at the places where people are moving in the United States, Texas, Tennessee, Florida, Arizona. I've looked in New York quite a bit. In fact, we were kind of close on a deal, and then your current mayor got elected.
Not my mayor.
Yeah. It's, you got to be somewhere where you can actually operate a business.
That's right.
And, the state of California is a place, and New York is a place where they're making it difficult to operate. And it's not even the cost. That's a piece of it. It's the fact that no matter what you do, you're going to trip over some regulation here or there, and you're going to end up in a lawsuit with an employee. And, that's not where you want to be.
No.
We want to take care of our employees. We don't want to be in an adverse relationship with them.
Sure. Well, I would love to see a Gibsons concept in New York one day. So hopefully one day down the road that'll happen, because I'd be very lucky to have that here. Yes.
And when said we know how to do big, and New York is big, there's none bigger. So
I know, right? All right, Steve, this has been such an incredible conversation. What you and your family have built is truly one of the great hospitality stories in America. And what stands out most is this. In an industry that constantly changes, the fundamentals still matter. Great food, great service, and a culture that people believe in. That's what makes something last. Thank you for your time tonight, and I can't wait to get back to Chicago and check out Gibsons Italia, Gibsons Steakhouse, Hugo's, what else am I missing? Quartino, Lux Bar, Ryan Lundquist. We love him on this show. So thank you for everything. We love your family. Have a good night.
Thank you, Christina.
All right, we're going to have to skip ingredient of the week this week because we kind of ran out of time. But guess what? It was dry-aged prime beef, which would have been a great feature. But maybe we'll incorporate that another time. But thank you for listening to Culinary Confidential. I'm your host, Christina Cates. And if you loved tonight's episode, make sure you're following along wherever you get your podcasts because this show is streaming on all major platforms. And don't forget, you can catch me every Sunday night at 9 p.m. Eastern on AM 970 The Answer. Next week, we're diving into another incredible conversation you won't want to miss. I'll be joined by Brandon Manley and Casey Cooley of the Foundry Group. Anchored in Columbia, South Carolina, the Foundry Group is a dynamic restaurant development and management company dedicated to creating distinctive dining experiences rooted in craftsmanship, community, and genuine hospitality. They have a portfolio that spans chef-driven concepts, neighborhood favorites, and luxury dining experiences. This is sure to be another amazing show with valuable industry insight on how to franchise. Until then, that's the show for tonight. Thanks for listening and have a great night.
The preceding program is sponsored by Shake It Off Live, LLC.
Andy Chrisman of For Him has spent 40 plus years in Christian music, and chances are he knows your favorite artist personally. Now he's bringing you their stories.
I'm Andy Chrisman.
In his new podcast, 1 Degree of Andy, he sits down with the voices behind the songs for real, honest, and faith-filled conversations you won't hear anywhere else.
That's a great question.
If you love Christian music, this is your backstage pass.
The 1 Degree of Andy podcast.
Listen now to 1 Degree of Andy wherever you get your podcasts.